All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, How Star Teachers Are Driving Success with Tech. We're very excited to have everyone joining us today. My name is Haley Peterson, and I'm one of the marketing associates here at Edmentum in Minneapolis. I'm also like to introduce you to your host today, McKenna Weirman, who will be running the panel. Before we get started with the presentation, I want to point out a few things on the attendee interface. So right now, you are looking at an example of the GoToWebinar control panel. This will be on the right-hand side of your screen. This control panel will help you to participate in today's webinar. So let's take a look. So by clicking the orange arrow button, you can open and close your panel. And then the audio pane provides all of your information. By default, you've joined the webinar with a microphone and speakers, but it's not needed because you'll be muted throughout the entire presentation. If you are having any difficulties with your speakers, you can join in by telephone. We've provided a toll-free toll-free number and access code. You don't have an audio pin because you'll be muted, so you don't have to worry about that. We also have the ability to chat in questions in the question pane. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and send out a test chat. So just everyone chat in and say hello. We have amazing panelists today who are looking forward to all of the questions you have for them. So go ahead and chat in and introduce yourself. Let us know that chat is working. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. I see a lot of answers coming in now. That's great. So like I said, I'm going to be here throughout the webinar behind the scenes. So please send me any questions that you have and either I'll answer them or we'll go over them at the end of the presentation where we reserved time for a Q&A. And then at this point, I am going to turn the webinar over to McKenna and our educators.
Sorry about that. Hello, everyone, and welcome again. My name is McKenna, and I'm on the marketing team here at Edmentum, and I'm so happy to have the privilege to introduce our amazing educators and the panelists that we have for today's webinar. So first up, we have Mr. Steve Clark, a special education teacher at Ortega High School in Lake Elsinore, California. Steve, you want to wave hello? All right, hi. And then next we have Mrs. Deborah Weiler, a sixth grade teacher at New Palestine Intermediate School in New Palestine, Indiana. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you.
And then we should have another panelist joining us, Mr. Vernell Jones, who teaches seventh grade math at White Station Middle School in Memphis, Tennessee. We'll see if he has time to hop on and join us. But now that we know who everyone is, we can go ahead and get rolling with our questions. All right, so we're all really excited to hear from each of you. So as we run through the questions, once again, feel free to chime in wherever you want. And to our viewers, as Haley said, there will be time at the end for a Q&A once we run through all of our panel questions. So be sure to chat those in and we'll get to them at the end. Awesome, all right, let's get started. So I'd like to start by opening this question up to all of the panelists. All of you have really amazing stories of how you've embedded technology in your classroom to increase engagement, drive growth, and personalize learning. Can each of you give a brief overview of your story and how you became a pace setter in education using tech?
Sure, I'll start. So for us, the biggest thing was, when I teach at a continuation high school, so all of our kids come in credit deficient, which means they're not on track for graduation. They're all either a year or more behind in credits to earn a diploma. And so coming into that environment, we're already dealing with kids that are school challenged and struggle in a traditional environment. So they're already coming into an alternative setting. And so using technology is another way that we provide that different learning environment that the student may benefit from because they haven't had success in a traditional classroom. For us, the biggest boon of using this technology and using Edmentum's platform was we needed a way to offer additional credits for recovery options for students that had failed multiple classes that maybe weren't going to have the opportunity to still take all the classes they needed for graduation. And so this tool allowed us to offer them opportunities to earn those credits back beyond the normal schedule that our school would offer. And so we started evaluating our blended learning model, which is really what it is, and started really looking at, our success rate in the past with it, kind of how the students were using it. And then we really just kind of hunkered down and retooled the whole program and relaunched our program 2 years ago with this newer model of how we're using Edmentum's courseware. And we saw a huge dramatic increase in credits recovered and student attendance and time spent, and ultimately it led to higher graduation rates. And so that's kind of how we got into this, and kind of how we ended up here. But that's kind of a brief overview.
Perfect. Awesome.
And we are a one-to-one school in our district. So we transitioned from just having a few computers in our classroom to iPads in the younger grades. We have MacBooks in the upper grades. So for us to transition to, pencil paper, textbooks, we now everything's online. And so taking that and figuring out how we're going to make that change, and so many tools, with technology, it's knowing what technology piece is going to work for you in the classroom. And I think that teachers love to network with other teachers and reach out and find out what's working in their classroom, what's not working. So for us, having the online resources with all of our testing, and we use, different products to find those gaps in learning, which is wonderful. It's that immediate feedback, finding out a student has mastered a skill, and we can move on with that.
Wonderful. Excellent. I love what you said there about networking. That is so vital. Good. All right. Well, I think we can move on to our next question then. And this one also I'd like to open up to all of our panelists. All of you were recognized for your technology integration and commitment to driving student engagement through technology. Can you tell us a little bit about what was important to you when you started using a digital learning program?
And I could start. I think what is important is for the students and the teachers to know that it's a tool that will help. So with that digital learning program, it's allowing those students that are below grade level, gives us an opportunity to find resources to support those students, and also above grade level. A student may be average in certain skills, but then we found out that through testing that they are really good at a specific skill. So we can, we don't have to stifle them. We can allow them to, hit those skills when they're above grade level. And teachers nowadays, we don't have all grade level materials. And so with this digital learning program, it allows us to hit, grade levels that are 4 below, above it, whatever we're teaching. And especially in this blended learning era, it allows students to really take charge and ownership of their own learning.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's a good point. And for us, the engagement piece was kind of the first thing we looked at. When we first evaluated our digital learning platform, we were really looking at, the kids already had kind of a negative connotation with it. These were kids that already struggled with school, and now we're asking them to read a whole bunch of stuff online, try to synthesize everything on their own, and then go in and take a bunch of tests. And so what we found was that kids just weren't connected with the material. It was kind of, we kind of set it up as an independent study type learning environment, and we got out of it what we were putting into it. And so we had to reevaluate our model. And so we started with trying to match the content in the program to the rigor of what we would teach in a regular classroom direct instruction setting. And then we just really didn't want the kids clicking through modules, which we found was really kind of what they were doing, especially at the high school level. The kids would click, click, click. How do I get to the end? How do I take a test and be done with this class because I hate it, I'm done. And so we really had to rethink that model. And so we reapproached our blended model and said, how we have to involve instructors. They have to be facilitators of this process. And so we redesigned our courses, we established new pacing guides for the kids, and then our biggest boon was shifting from the traditional model of using it to using a more of a blended model. So, we developed a Cornell note system of notes that the kids would take along with the module. So they had to turn in some kind of tangible work. They could do it digitally if they wanted to, but that piece, along with a grading rubric that went along with the notes, was really what we emphasized the grade on so that we saw an immediate increase in participation and time spent in modules, because they couldn't get past things without having to turn in these notes. And so we saw a huge shift in where kids were spending 3 to 5 hours in an entire course to now they're having to spend 20 to 40 hours in a course. They couldn't just click through anymore. We devalued the tests, and so we really put an emphasis on the kids synthesizing what they're reading, not just trying to look for answers. And so they had to take notes, they had to present ideas, they had to talk with a teacher or an instructor to go over those notes. And if their grade was based primarily on those notes, there was no skirting around that. And so that was our big shift, and it really boosted our engagement. And the results showed.
That's awesome that you guys were able to accomplish so much by just taking that really deep look at what you were doing. That's wonderful. All right. Steve, this next question is also for you. As you mentioned, you're a special education teacher at a highly regarded alternative high school. And I know when you started your current role, you worked really closely with your principal to develop your current program. Can you tell us 2 to 3 things that you and your principal did that drove your successful implementation, and why you think that approach was effective?
Sure. We have a really great principal, Dr. Greg Cleve. He's amazing. He really just said, hey, look, we need to fix this. This is not working. And we've invested a lot of time and energy in the past into this product, but we know that ultimately our kids need the ability to earn these credits back. So he kind of tasked me with heading up that group. And ultimately what we found was that we needed to experiment. We needed to try different things. We needed to think outside the box, and we needed to not be afraid to fail. And so he was really supportive of that. And the biggest thing for us was that each quarter he allowed us the time that we needed to evaluate the data, to sit down and really focus our PLC groups on data evaluation and time spent. And he was our biggest cheerleader all the way through. He knew that we needed a better vision for the blended model, and he gave us a lot of support outside of the classroom too, extra time, breakout days if we needed them, resources if we needed them. We invested a lot in just even material outside of the classroom. Like we developed posters and guidebooks and, presentations through like a PowerPoint for new kids. And so all that stuff takes time. And so every quarter, we're on the quarter-based system. So every time we wrapped up a quarter of using it, we went through this deep dive evaluation. And he was a big part of helping us collect data, because as teachers, we have other jobs to do too. So we couldn't do all this unhanded. But as a principal, he was able to kind of spend some time deconstructing the data and aggregating all the data that we needed. So when we got into PLCs, we weren't spending all of our time just trying to sift through what was important and what wasn't. So those are the big 3 things that I think he helped us accomplish.
That's amazing that you have such a wonderful support system behind you. That's really great. Awesome. All right. Okay, well, Deborah, I think we can give you a question now, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned, you're a 6th grade teacher, and you work with a lot of different teachers in your school. How do you help admins encourage other staff in your school to get on board with using technology in their classrooms? And what are a few tangible things you and your administrators do to successfully win over hesitant staff?
I think what Steve said about the time, it's anything that is new, if we implement anything in our curriculum, anything with technology, it's time and training. And just like our students learn in a different way, so do teachers. Teachers sometimes can grasp something with the technology and move forward. So it's just knowing that you have the support from our administrators that, to give us time during our PLCs, to allow us time in a staff meeting, to work out the kinks, find out what's working, and I go back to that networking, find out from other staff members, how they're using something, and to have another teacher come into your classroom and help your students along. Even having different classrooms with your peers, have the kids come in. And sometimes the way a teacher will teach, something, when it comes out of the mouth of another student, they get it. And so I think that, really that term stepping outside of the box is so, so important. And the tangibles, it's that, it helps with our time. And students, I think it's important that they set goals. So, I recently was listening to a webinar, and I heard one of the presenters say that we don't send our students out on the playground without supervision. And I think that's so important right now with the technology playground. There needs to be supervision. And so I think that it's important for our administrators to, set goals with their teachers, just like we set goals with our students, and giving teachers that benchmark. And if teachers are reluctant, reaching out, no one's, going to be reprimanded for it. Just figure out what we can do to help them.
Awesome, great. So it's really about community support as much as it is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that data piece, Steve, it is so important that they understand that this is in support of our testing. It is some support of all the things that we're already doing in the classroom, and to be able to, teachers aren't going to do something that's going to add more work to their plate. By having the technology piece and having these, learning platforms, it gives us an opportunity to take something off. And then, but it doesn't go away. It's there for us to still evaluate. It's just now on a side plate.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. All right. Okay, well, I think both of you have sort of touched on this a little bit, but I would like to revisit it. So as both of you have mentioned to a degree, it can be a little rough sometimes getting students to have fun while they're learning. It can feel like a task. Sometimes they don't want to do it. But both of you have been really successful in getting students engaged in their learning. So what are some tips and tricks that each of you have for making sure students are having fun but learning at the same time?
So I can start here. So for us, it's really about re-engaging them in school again. Working in an alternative environment, our kids come in, they've never had a ton of success in school, and so their view of school in general is negative. And so we have to really shift the mindset. And so using the Edmentum courseware and the model that we've set up, when we start guiding a kid through that and they start having a little bit of success, they get through a course or they get through a module, all of a sudden the mindset starts to turn. And then there's this light at the end of the tunnel suddenly. And we really start to see them motivated. It clicks. About the second or third week into a quarter, when they realize, like, oh man, if I just hunker down and I try harder, like I might be able to get through this. Or, if I'm not sure, I can ask the teacher in the classroom. I don't have to hide. And that's really kind of the shift that happens for our kids. And then once they view, like, man, if I work hard, I can finish this class early and do another one, and I could do another one, and then before you know it, I'm back on track for graduation. Like, a lot of times that's what happens with our juniors that come in. They're credit deficient. They're having a terrible time in school. We kind of walk them through this model. We kind of handhold them through the first course. And when they finish it, for a lot of them, it's the first time they've got a passing grade in months, if not years. And so that's feeling of like, oh, wow, like I can do school. Like it's not impossible, is a huge deal for them. And a little bit of success breeds more success. And that's the big shift that happens. And then they stop hating coming to school. And especially with a blended or an online learning environment, you still have to have that relationship and connection with the kids to make it fun and to make it interesting and to make them want to trust you to guide them through this process. So that's the big thing, is just because you teach an online class or you teach a blended learning environment doesn't mean you get to just walk away from the kids. You have to really still be engaged, walk around, ask them what they're doing, see where they're at. Are you struggling with anything? Can I help you? I am not afraid to pull up a chair and sit down right next to a kid, especially if they're not doing anything, because it tells me that they're lost and they need help. And so that's what we're there for. And that's my big reason for revamping this model. So that's kind of our goal with this, is really re-engaging the student learner and making school accessible and consumable again for them.
Absolutely. And Steve, piggybacking on that comment, it's the purpose. Giving the kids the upfront, this is the purpose of what we're doing. How can they set a goal for something that they don't understand the purpose? And so if they see it as just busy work, then they can't set a goal. So I think it's important that notebook, having kids, it's that accountability piece. Knowing that students, I'm going to ask for their notes if I give them an article online, if I give them an Edmentum, assignment. It's knowing that what I've given them, I will call them, and that way we can process. I mean, it's hard for me to talk to a student when I have all 29 kids on a different platform, a different lesson from second grade all the way to eighth grade. And so I think without having, it's a conversation piece. Let me see your notes. Let me see your notebook. And that really does give us an opportunity to figure out the student that's not working. Why are you not working? I mean, we all know we've had kids that have sat there and not pushed a pencil. Well, they're not going to sometimes click on a computer screen. So it's finding if they just truly didn't understand the assignment. But having that notebook, and I've even had kids write on there, I received a bad grade on this lesson. I just don't understand it. So it's important because it's that conversation starter. When you call a student one-to-one, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Really? Are you sure? I don't see your notes. And so I think for kids to know that, they have a voice, and sometimes it's hard for them to know how to use their voice. So by writing it down, journaling, I think that is really a good tip for helping the kids.
Awesome. And I love how both of you really tied it back to inspiring your students to want to be a part of their own learning and to really realize that it's fun to take charge and want to do that for themselves. That's really wonderful. I love that.
And kids want to be independent until they feel challenged, and then that's when they no longer are independent. And so being aware of that and knowing when sometimes you just may have to pull another student to help, just to get them through that section. So I think, again, we need to teach our kids how to network also.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it too, if I can add something just briefly, so many of our kids, especially when they're older and they're at the high school level, they feel like the teachers and or administrators in that sense are gatekeepers. These guys are, they look at the adults in the room and they go, these are the people that are in charge of my education or in charge of me getting a diploma or in charge of my success. And really that's not true. And so it's really about getting them to take ownership of their learning again. It's about re-engaging them in the process of like, hey, this is about you. This is your future. This is your diploma. We already got our diplomas. And so we are just facilitators on this ship. Like, you are ultimately the captain of your own ship. And that's kind of the message that we try to send to them, is that like the teachers are not barriers to graduation. They're not barriers to success. They're not the roadblocks, because a lot of them do feel that way. Like, these, you gave me an F, you're keeping me from success. We really have to shift the mindset of ownership and then what role the teacher plays in that ownership model. And that's kind of the approach that we take at our school.
What is nice about with our Edmentum, with the lessons that we assign, going back to that ownership, students, if they did not do very well, they can do it again. And so, I mean, if they have to prove it. So many times when we used to do tons and tons of workbooks, students says, why do I have to do this? I already know this. Well, then prove it. And so now by having those online tools, students can prove in multiple ways that they have mastered that skill.
That's a great point, because one of the great features of the courseware and in Edmentum in general is the ability to apply past mastery. So for us, kids come in, every time a kid starts an online course, one of the first things we do as a staff is we look to say, have they taken this class before? Have they taken it in brick and mortar? Have they taken it in Edmentum before and just didn't do well? And so what our first objective is to try to not make the kids start the race over. If you got halfway there, we're going to start you halfway there. And that's really the thing is the flexibility of the courseware modules allows us to say, hey, you know what? You finished that course with a 45 or 50%. You didn't pass, but you were close. So let's pick up where you left off and let's try to get you to passing. And then once we get to passing, then it's like, hey, do you want to go for a higher grade? Do you want to go for that A or B? And for someone who may have never even seen an A or B grade in their life, it's a huge deal when that first letter grade comes out where they're like, oh my gosh, like I can get an A if I just invested a little more time, or I tried a little bit harder in this area, or if I work with Mr. Clark a little bit longer, it works. And so that's a huge piece for us, because we get kids that in a quarter system, they only get 9 weeks to finish a class. And they may not get there. So we start off with the mindset of like, hey, some of you may not finish this in 9 weeks, and that's okay, because this platform allows me to keep the window open. You can keep working. Nothing goes away. You don't have to start over when you finish. And that's a huge deal for our kids. They don't feel like the burden of the time constraint if they are someone that needs more time. So that's a huge deal for us too.
Wonderful. It sounds like both of you have really cultivated a really positive classroom culture that's supportive and strives for success, but where it's also okay to learn from your mistakes and to grow from that. That's wonderful. All right, I think we can move on to our next question, if that's all right. Again, we'll keep it open to everybody. But both of you have had so much success in your classrooms with your students and with your implementations. And what would you say is your biggest success after implementing technology in your school?
I think for me, test scores, it allows, and time. My biggest success is that it's, I'm not spending so much time behind the copier. So I think that by having technology is just, it allows for students of all levels. We can reach them in more ways than we've ever been able to reach. And by allowing that technology, to do online assessments, allowing students to, write a paper online and submit it through Canvas. I think it's so important that we not only hit the kids because these kids, they know their technology, but we also have to remember that there are going to be those reluctant kids that still are hesitant and they don't know how to use it. And that's when then if we have to pull out the pencil paper. But then also I think it's important for the parents and the guardians to understand why we're doing it. I can't tell you how many times teachers or parents have asked us, where's the book? Well, the book's online. So I think by making sure that the correct vocabulary is being used. That we have all these online tools and knowing, that we're using the correct terminology with the correct, whatever program we're using, because kids can submit tests and papers multiple platforms. And so I think it's that we have to be consistent with what we are using in the classroom. We can't switch right in the middle of the school year. If we do it, we've got to do it slowly, because even if I have a tray for students to put their papers in and I move the tray, well, there's going to be kids who are not going to turn it in because the tray is not in its proper spot. So I think with technology, it's just making sure that we are consistent with what we're using.
That's a good point. And to piggyback off what you said, I love the idea of the differentiation piece. I know for us, we deal with our population's almost 20% sped, which is almost twice what a normal school would be in most cases. So the the ability to differentiate quickly and effectively with the courseware was a huge boon for us, given that you can click a button and a kid can listen to the slides being read to them, and it's not in like a monotone voice. It's actually someone reading the content to them like a teacher. And for us, when we teach some of these blended sections, we might have 18, 26 different sections in one classroom going at a time. And so the teacher really relies on that differentiation piece to be able to say, hey, just listen to this slide, listen to it again, and then I'll come back and review it while they help someone else. That's a big deal. For us, on a micro level, the big sign of success was when we looked at time on task. When kids are spending more time with the material, just by nature of spending more time with it, they're synthesizing more. So that was a big deal for us. On a micro level, we saw our time on task skyrocket, up by tenfold. So that was a big deal. And that was our first indicator that the shifts we were making were paying off. And so I would say to anyone, the data is important. Time on task data is important. Looking at course completion rates was our next level up, kind of transitioning towards a macro level. How many courses were our kids actually completing? Were they finishing them? Were they getting passing grade? And then once we started seeing those numbers go up from an ultimate macro level, we saw our graduation rates go up. More kids were finishing classes. They were able to get to the deadline faster. Our graduation rates went up 17% over 2 years, which is huge. And ultimately what it did was, when we were able to implement this model successfully and kids started having success, they started realizing that based on that model, they could finish earlier. So we had our largest graduating class of third quarter kids this year, which in the long game allowed us to help more kids. We have limited seats at our school, and so there's always a waiting list of kids trying to get in from comprehensive campuses. And so having this model allows us to help more kids. And ultimately, that's our goal as an alternative site, is maximizing the number of students we can help to get towards that diploma track. And so in 2019, we actually experienced our largest graduating class ever. And so that was a big deal. And the way we approach the blended learning model was a huge part of that. We wouldn't have been able to accomplish those numbers without that piece. So for us, that's what success has been like with the technology implementation.
That's wonderful. I love how both of you covered that, I feel like we're all inclined to look at success as a single metric, but really there's so many levels to it, and it's so expansive. And really when it comes down to it, it's amazing what you guys have been able to accomplish for your students. That's really great. All right, great. I think we can move on to our next question. So again, for both of you, there's a lot of stuff going on when it comes to using technology in the classroom, and everyone's attention span, and it feels like it's a little bit shorter than it used to be a little while ago. So how do you deal with distracted students during class, and do you have any tips on ways to keep them focused when they're using a device or just in general?
I'm going to go back to that, accountability piece, knowing that what is the task that they are responsible for, what is the goal, and knowing that we're going to follow up. We're going to have a conversation, whether it's in a small group or, if I have to call out a student individually. But that notebook, just because, even though everything's online, we still need to work pencil paper with our brain. We still need to write. And so I think it's important that the students, again, you're going to know the ones that, whether it's on their computer or, with a workbook, those are going to be the kids that are not going to be able to stay on task. So making sure that their goal is attainable, setting that goal together. What are you going to work on today? And then making sure, because if it's, something that they can't do in a week, then they're not going to get it done. So I think it's knowing each individual student and knowing that we are going to hold them accountable. It's just like if you didn't turn in a paper, if you don't turn in your online work, we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna figure out what happened.
That's all good points. And I know for us, especially with our high school kids, this is an ongoing battle. We fight this every day. And this is one of the things that when we talk about evaluation and implementation in our PLCs of this model, how do we combat this? Because especially with a blended learning model, the kids are already using technology. So it seems easier for them to just whip out a phone and or be distracted with that model, especially because a lot of our kids are working in different classes at once. So for a teacher, there's not a lot of direct instruction happening. And so it kind of takes away from that you have to pay attention to me piece. And a lot of them will just put their headphones in. A lot of them are listening to music. They're trying to drown out other noise. There's whatever excuse you can make up, our kids have it. And so the big thing for us is proximity, walking around. We've tried anything from, especially for some of our more independent classes, we do check-in, check-out sheets where a student has to write in, what module they're working on, how far they got, and they have to physically write in time on task. With our Cornell note pages that we use for the kids to turn in their notes, we've actually, that's evolved every quarter. We've added something different. And now we've added where a student has to put their time on task down before they turn those in. And we verify that. If we have a student that's struggling, like maybe in that DF range, one of our layers of intervention that we do with them is, aside from working with them one-on-one, we get the parent involved. But the way we do that is, aside from just sending home a DF report, we actually add in their admin printout of like how much time they're spending on task. We show the screen time. So that way the parent kind of has an idea of like, hey, you have 50 minutes in this period and you only spent 15 minutes in the class. Like, what are you doing with that other time? And that's kind of the big thing that we use as a driver for us with the kids is like, sometimes it's just that awareness piece for them. We slide that paper in front of them and go, like, let's look at how much time we're actually spending in the program. It's not it's not a accident that you're failing this class. So let's maybe, so that as a teacher, that's kind of my sign too, that I need to be, better of checking in on that student. What's going on? Maybe they don't get it. Maybe they're struggling and I'm just not being as good a facilitator as I need to be. So that's a big thing. And, so proximity, providing the data to the kids and the parents and the check-ins is a huge deal.
Awesome. So really, it sounds like it's very much top of mind, but you guys are finding ways to combat it. That's great. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we have enough time here to move on to our last question. And I know I think this one is very top of mind for everybody here. So we're really excited to hear your answers. What advice or words of wisdom would you share with administrators, principals, or teachers about bringing technology into the classroom? It's a little bit scary for some people, or they may have hesitations to it, but both of you have met it head on. So, what's the secret to success?
I think for me, I go back to what principals and administrators can do is just support the teachers. Whatever platform that the school districts are using, I just making sure that the administrators are giving the teachers time to learn something new. We don't know what, they might have other jobs besides education, which happens a lot, family issues. And so I think it's important that that administrators are supporting the teachers with whatever tools they need. If they need additional training, then finding either a teacher trainer, or sometimes like the webinars, making sure to give the teachers the time to learn it and to really and process. Just because you bring a trainer in doesn't mean that we've all we can implement it right away. Just giving them time and just like we do in the classroom, just don't rush the things that are new. That is I guess for me that would be the biggest advice.
Yeah, so I actually had three things I wrote down, and I just to kind of clear my head too. I would say have a plan. Have a plan for how you're going to approach this model. Evaluate your implementation of the model, and then don't be afraid to make changes. If something's not working, throw it away and try something else. I know for us, after doing this for 2 years, we're still evaluating. We're constantly evaluating because ultimately the kids change. Our kids change quarter after quarter and year after year. So we're constantly evaluating our system. What worked, in quarter one may not work in quarter four. And so um, plan, evaluate, and make changes. I would say the other thing too is collaborate. A big deal for us was we had kind of this de facto divisions within our school of like, oh, these are the blended teachers, and then here's the direct instruction teachers. And we had this kind of separation. And as someone that was tasked with this, I really felt like all these courses are the same. The outcomes should all be the same. And so I really spent a lot of time engaging with my direct instruction teachers, the rest of my gen ed team on, how do we improve this model? What can we think? What kind of things are you doing? What kind of things would you like to see the online version do? And that was the thing too, is that there was kind of this negative perception too from gen ed teachers of how these courses were being offered and how they were being used. And so we involved them in this process. And so that was a big deal. So I would say collaborate, get your admin involved, get your other team members involved, make everyone part of this process and get different perspectives. We would do student surveys at the end of each quarter just to get an idea of, how did you like this tweak that we made, and kind of get some student feedback too. And I would say lastly, above and beyond else, be engaging with your students. It's easy with technology to step back and let the students just kind of work independently, but they need practice in that skill set. We just assume that they know how to work independently, and that's not always a good assumption. They need someone to guide them through how to do it. Walk around, give them feedback, do mini workshops, do small group breakout, check for understanding. Let them know that you're as invested in the class as you want them to be. Because that's the big thing, is they feel like they look at you and they're like, what's this teacher doing? He's not doing anything. He's not teaching me anything. You have to be as invested as you want them to be. And so they can feel that. And if you're not doing that, they will respond accordingly.
Right. The technology is not replacing the teachers, and the teachers just need to make sure that we are still instructing. And there's a time and place for the technology, using it to to the best ability that we can in our classroom, but just knowing that students still need teachers. They still need instruction. And it's just going to enhance what we're already doing in the classroom.
Just another tool in the toolbox.
Absolutely.
Our
toolbox is getting bigger and bigger. We need more drawers.
Right. Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I think that is the end of my questions that I have prepared for you guys. But once again, I just want to thank you so much for joining us. And I think we all really appreciated hearing what you had to say. And yeah, all right. So I guess now I'll hand it back to Haley, and we can start taking questions from our viewers.
All right, yeah, so at this time, I will go ahead and start our Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please chat them in now and we'll get to them. We've got about 15 minutes here. I did get a question during our scheduled questions for Mr. Clark or Steve pertaining to time on task. Do you have a minimal time on task for original credit courses, like in order to obtain course credit completion?
Great question. So we started when we started evaluating that, we looked at the model of should the time on task match what a direct instruction brick and mortar class would look like, and it depends. So for first time credit for a student, a lot of kids aren't taking our courses for first time credit. Say that, yeah, time on task should be close to that 30 to 40 hour mark for our entire course completion. For a recovery class, for a student who's taking it, the situation could vary, but ultimately we kind of looked at how much time they're spending per week. and kind of break it down to a micro level per module. So we know the kids get 45 to 50 minutes a day in a class. So we really should see at the end of every week, they should be spending 3 to 5 hours in the program. And so that's when we look at time on task targets, that's what we target is that 3 to 5 hour range per week. Because if they're doing that, then we know that they're spending time in the content, they're spending time with the course, and they're at least investing time in the classroom while they're there to hit that mark. So that's kind of like our magic number, if you will, is that 3 to 5 hour mark. Because for some of our more advanced kids, they're gonna synthesize information a lot quicker and complete tasks a lot faster. So we don't set a benchmark, if you will, but we have a kind of a framework.
Awesome. Thank you. I hope that answered your question. Oh, I did get a follow-up question. Do you require a minimum grade for final exams, and then do you use pre-test for credit recovery courses?
Again, good question. So as far as final exams go, no. So of the bulk of our grading is based on the work that they're doing. So the Cornell note piece is a huge chunk of our grading. So I would say that's probably 70 to 75% of the students' grade in the class. As far as like end of unit tests and post tests and end of module tests, we do put emphasis on that, but we've actually shifted away from those tests for the most part, and we've actually gone to a project-based final. So as opposed to having the kids take a big test, and for example, our science courses, they still take all the tests because our science team feels like that's a really important part for them to gauge knowledge, but they give them access to their entire Cornell notes that they've done throughout the whole course to do those tests. So that's a big deal. For our English courses and for some of our other courses that we use this for, we go for more of a project-based final where they have to take all the information from their notes, synthesize it into a final project that we've embedded into the course as the final piece, is like a supplemental. And so that's our big thing for that. As far as the pre-testing goes, we absolutely use pre-test for students that are taking credit recovery. It's a way for us to gauge how much they retained. It's a way for us to see, if they were close to passing, hopefully they're coming in with some kind of prior knowledge and they can apply that to the course. And we want to reward them for the things that they do remember. So that way they don't feel like they're starting an entire class over. If they retained any type of knowledge, it should show up in those pre-test modules.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. My next question that I got is, let's see here. So can you guys talk a little bit more about how you incorporate your online programs to like a regular class setting? So like, do you use like all online courses, or or does it supplement?
For me, it's supplements. So when we are, our students, when I'm doing a guided reading group, my students have task lists through the blended learning. And so through that task list, it might be, they have to do 2 reading lessons, they might have to do 1 grammar lesson, but they have a checklist. And again, going back to that notebook. So it supplements what I'm doing. It's not all online. Our math, we still have a math textbook, but it's online, and it's just an opportunity. I use my study island and my it just everything supports and just reinforces what the kids are doing in the skill that I'm looking for mastery.
So for us, we use 3 different models. So we have our credit recovery model, which are completely separate classes that students are filtered into, where there could be multiple subjects, multiple sections within one classroom, and they're all there to recover those credits. Those are classes that they failed previously, and they need to recover those. So that's a big chunk of our usage. The other way is supplemental instruction, like Deborah said. Our science team uses the Admenim courseware as a supplemental to the textbook, especially for our kids, because sometimes the textbook is a little challenging. The academic language is a little bit beyond their understanding, especially if they failed these classes before. So they really use it as kind of a digital textbook tool, because there's a lot of great videos and content that's embedded within those courseware programs that really help our science team. So they use it as a supplemental. For our math department, it's the core use of the one of our classes. So we have a transitional math course that is like a foundations, if you will. A lot of kids come in struggling with math, and so we use the Adminum assessments tool. We have all the kids take an assessment in math, and then it builds a prescriptive path to get them to algebra readiness. And that's a big deal for us, because ultimately they have to be able to pass algebra to get a high school diploma. And so instead of just throwing them into an algebra class and letting them fail 2 or 3 times, we put them into a transitional math class where they can take a test. It kind of gauges what their skill level is, and then it builds a prescriptive path for them to build their skill set up to algebra readiness. And then our math teachers just kind of walk around and help each student with their individual skills that are assigned to them in the assessment tool. So it's kind of like having an individualized math class for every kid. So those are the 3 ways that we use the technology in the courseware modules.
Very awesome. Thank you. And I think that you answered quite a few of the questions that we've got in chat here. I have one more question for you, and then if anyone else has any more questions to add into, if anyone else watching has any more questions, please chat them in. But one is, do you think using technology in your classroom saves you time, either with grading or with like individual work or?
I'm going to definitely say in an elementary setting, in an intermediate, it no matter what setting you're in, what grade, it does allow for some, it helps with time management. It allows, well, if I need to do a quick assessment on a student just to see if they've hit mastery yet, and I can do that with my technology. I don't have to create something. It's already created for me. And there's multiple assessments that I can use, whether I'm using my Edmentum or whatever online, program that we're using. I think it doesn't, again, replace the teacher. It doesn't, we still need to grade. We still need to look at the process, how the students are doing. But it just definitely complements and saves us time. Grading, the planning, everything is there. We use NWEA as one of our assessments, and so I can use that as a as a remediation tool too. So during my RTI, I can use my Edmentum Exact Path or Study Island to support those students with skills that I would not have been able to catch in one of my pre-tests or one of my post-tests. And so it allows students to see that NW and teachers that your score is more than just a score. Let's delve deeper into it. Let's figure out exactly what is that score made up of, whether it's you're great at geometry, you're great with computation, but maybe the algebra section is not your strength. So by allowing us to use those things, definitely can save time, because there's times we would not have been able to catch that, especially if they were 2 and 3 grade levels below.
That's a great point. And I would say that kind of dovetails into how we would view that question. Is for us, it's this provides time-saving options. I would look at it and go, it allows for the teacher to not have to spend so much time designing and building a lesson around a particular content area, and allows them to really focus on the adaptability of that lesson, the accommodations, the differentiation that needs to happen. So instead of investing a ton of time in building these lessons out, it allows for the teacher to focus on, how do I make this content more consumable? How do I adapt this for our type of learners or for a specific type of learner? And so it allows us to easily provide those accommodations. So that, as a time saver alone, that's a big deal. For our more independent learners, it's on the opposite end of the spectrum. This would allow them to complete tasks quicker. They don't need to wait for the feedback. They don't need to wait for the response. And for that small percentage of our kids that thrive in that environment, this is a big deal. Especially for our kids that maybe are non-traditional learners, they get into these classes and they're like, sweet, I can work as fast as I want. This is awesome. And it really motivates them to get finished. And so I would say on the opposite end of the spectrum, it's a time saver in that sense too.
All right, perfect. Well, it doesn't look like I have any more questions. And I think that's all of the time we have. So I think we can go ahead and wrap up the presentation for today. Um, yeah, let's see. We'll stay on the line for a couple more minutes to answer any lingering questions anyone has, but I want to thank everybody for joining, and I want to thank Steve and Deborah. It's so nice of you guys to take time out of your summer to like just share your expertise. This has been really, really great. Um, and just for everyone watching, if you guys are interested in Adventum programs at all, you can find us on adventum.com, find us on our blog and our social channels. And yeah, like I said, we'll stay on the line for any lingering questions. But thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.
Great,
Thanks,
thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. I do have a question that says if you've used the Admentum courseware collaboration tool to create project-based learnings, do you have ideas that you can share? Or do you use courseware with project-based learning at all?
We usually have, so traditional project-based learning is a little bit different. We use it in the sense of we have projects that we've already created, and then we embed them within our custom courses. So when we build a custom course, we add in that supplemental project to the end of the course as a way to maybe take the place of a final or to take the place of a post-test. So we don't use the collaboration tool very much, but what we will do is maybe put the kids in groups to do that final piece. We've done that before where, we'll assign maybe all the kids that are in, let's say, an English 9 class, they all take the same group final, and it's maybe a group project or a group dynamic or a project based for in a math class. So in that sense, we just embed our own content into the course for those projects.
We have not used that yet.
Okay. All right. Well, that looks like everything that I have. It doesn't look like any other lingering questions have popped in. So like I said, thank you guys so much for your time. This was really, really great. And thank you everyone who stayed on the line. Have a great day.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a great